Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Executive. My name is Councillor Paul Fallows, Leader of the Council and Chair of the meeting. Sorry, I've got the wrong document up. Can I first of all just remind everybody that we're going to be live on the webcast and the agenda was published on Friday the 22nd of August 2025. Chris, can I have apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Leader. Just confirm apologies this evening from Councillor Liz Townsend.
Thank you, Chris. And for the exec, can I have confirmation that you're happy to approve the minutes of the meeting of the 5th of August? Agreed. Thank you. Declarations. Any members declared anything before the meeting? And any from the floor? Nope. Questions from members of the public? Any received?
Just confirm, Leader. No questions from members of the public.
And rather surprisingly, no questions from members. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. In which case, then we'll move on to item 6, which is Leader and Portfolio Holders updates. Although we don't run parliamentary terms, so to speak, I always mentally feel like it's back from the school holidays whenever we have the first one of these. Of course, some of us didn't technically leave, and it feels like we've been here all summer. But it does feel like psychologically we're back after the summer holidays today. So over the course of August, there's been a few movements on LGR, but also just to say in the public domain, we have a few dates that we're now aware of, or at least some closer dates. The Surrey Leaders Group has been meeting over August to discuss the transition rearrangements that precede the structural change order in the early part of 2026, that itself precedes the election of the shadow councillors for the Unitary Authority in May. We've been asked by the government to get informal transition arrangements in place over October, which is good because we were thinking of doing that anyway, considering that the period between January and May is not very long for anybody to do any planning to create a unitary authority. So you will see in the diaries a number of additional executive and council sessions put in over Q4 25 and Q1 26 to address some of the decision points that we have to deal with over the course of that time. We've also been made aware by the government, we don't know how much this will be, but in mid-September, when we have the fair funding review details, I hope, we will also have an understanding of Woking's debt and how much the government are going to pay off in terms of that money. It would have to be a very large amount of money to deal with this issue, but we'll find out how much it's going to be then. And then finally, we're expecting an answer on the 2 versus 3 question and some of the other things that fall out of that at the conclusion of parliamentary recess. So probably something about the 15th of October. Sorry, parliamentary recess for conferences and conference recess in about the 15th of October. So there'll be a few things that will follow after that. What is likely to be the case is that the transitional authority for West Surrey, whether it be the Big Surrey, the Big West or the Little West, will be made up of 3 members from each of the boroughs and 3 members from the county. So you can see there that the county may not have quite as much control over this process as they might possibly have hoped, but that is likely the way the structural change orders are going to go. So all of this is now known to all the boroughs and districts, so there's no issue with me communicating it in public. Tony, up to you. Any announcements?
I just would like to say, particularly for 2 other Farnham councillors here, obviously everyone is aware of the town centre improvement works part of the Farnham infrastructure programme, and I'd just like to go on record for saying that actually Surrey and Ringway are doing an excellent job so far. Yes, Downing, there has been some social media comments that Downing Street being closed is affecting business. To be honest with you, we at Waverley haven't seen that in our car park data or indeed the footfall data. And certainly looking at the work, when you compare the work that has been done, say at the bottom of Union Road and the bottom of Downing Street, the quality of it is far, far, far superior to what has been recently done a year ago on East Street. So credit where it's due. They're doing a cracking job. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I'm just going to, for ease of my own brain, going to go from this end. So Victoria.
Nothing, thank you. Nothing from me today.
Steve.
Nothing this evening, thanks.
Mark.
Well surprised, hot on the heels of reporting last time out that the audit of our 24-25 accounts had started. For anyone who's missed this, which can't be many, I just want to place on record on video on YouTube as well as everywhere else that I'm really proud that our finance team have been shortlisted for the finance team of the year in the councils and local services category for the Public Finance Awards in 2025. And I look forward to Friday, the 28th of November, 2025 at the Midland Hotel in Manchester, when I hope, with all fingers crossed, that they get the recognition they deserve. Thank you.
That was going to be my next question as to when we find out. And again, I'll pass my congratulations on to the team for the sterling work that they've done to get where they have done. It did certainly prompt some debate online, though, from people who were somewhat forced to meet the reality of some of the comments they'd made in the past with that kind of news. It was slightly interesting watching certain people have a massive go at whoever the people running that were to find it was SIPFA. And various other very sensible public sector bodies. So I've certainly enjoyed that, but well done to the finance team. Paul.
Thank you, Leader. Nothing to add. Thank you.
Kika.
Yes, I am, because I think it's very, this is one of the places where actually people pick up on some of the stuff, particularly pump track when we were talking about it last time. So I am just going to give you a few updates. The Gostry Group, who have moved, are relocated from the Memorial Hall to Brambleton Hall, are still providing freshly cooked hot lunches. We have given them 5,000 to get a new oven and some equipment to continue the community meals service 5 days a week, which is very important. The hot lunch will also get delivered to Faulkner Court on Fridays, where they will now be providing activities, something that has been much needed there for a long time. The Farnham Hospital Hopper Service is doing well, with funding from us, matched by Farnham Town Council, with further funding from the Dempster Trust and the Farnham Hedgehog. So much appreciated. Thank you very much. The service started at the end of July and has already completed 89 passenger trips and 99 new registrations. We do encourage people to use this service during the 6-month pilot. Just to remind all that there is also a Cranley Hospital Hopper service and a Godalming and Hazelmere one, so that all our residents have access to more affordable hospital transport and support door-to-door service. Thanks.
If I remember correctly, starting with Tony and Paul tomorrow and following week with the rest of us, we're scaling Farnham Museum, aren't we, to go and have a look at that. For somebody who's not a fan of heights when they're not in a plane or something like that, that's going to be a
We thought you
fun
could
day.
do some abseiling, just get you into
I've
the
done it
feel
before,
of it.
in fairness.
Okay.
I'm not going to say I'm going to love it, but I've done it before. Right. Okay. And finally, Janet.
No, thank you. Nothing for tonight.
Okay. One thing I am just going to say, because I feel like I should in this particular forum, we this morning in our internal meeting of the executive finished the discussion with a bit of a discussion about flags. And across Waverley, I haven't seen the sorts of issues that have manifested themselves across other parts of the country or indeed parts of Surrey. And I did just want to remind anybody that the County Highways Authority has an obligation to deal with highway safety matters and will do so where they're flagged. That's a piece of county business, not Waverley business. And I appreciate I'm almost channeling Paul Rivers here when it comes to flag related puns. I will plumb those depths, I'm sure, as much as I need to. I do feel it necessary, though, to raise the issue that a number of people who are raising these flags in the name of some kind of patriotism are concerning a large number of residents who feel intimidated by that. And whilst I'm not going to sit here and say don't raise flags or do raise flags, I'm just going to ask those who raise flags to think about why they're doing them and the motivations for them. And I'm also going to say, please put your flags up the right way. Please don't put flags up that aren't actually official flags with things written all over them or indeed are outright offensive because they will be moved. But just to reflect that your feelings of patriotism may impact on residents who are feeling intimidated by some of the things that they are seeing across the country. But also just to repeat, where there is a highway safety matter or where something like that is either overtly a hate crime or is causing that level of intimidation, first of all, the County Highways Authority will certainly act, and if it's on Waverley property, we will do so. And very finally, I'll just highlight that Surrey Pride will take place on Saturday, the 6th of September. And many of us here from Guildford and Waverley will be in attendance to support the LGBTQ+ community as much as we can do. And moving then to item 7, which is the recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My understanding is that there are no recommendations from the Overall Scrutiny Committee.
Not in relation to anything on this agenda.
Fair enough. And so the next ONS committees are scheduled to meet, services on the 15th and resources on the 23rd. In which case, then I think we move on to probably the main item of tonight's discussion, which is item 8, the shared regulatory services for Guildford and Waverley. And I'll ask Tony to propose. I will be registered as seconder. Tony.
Thank you, Paul. Before I formally begin, I'd like to advise you of 3 minor typographical numerical errors relating to paragraphs 6.4, 6.10.10 and 12.11. So in 6.4, the figures should be, as they are, 4,053,870. The second figure should be 3,960,870, and those figures will deliver a revised saving of £93,000. In 6.10.10, the figures for Waverley should be 44,000 and for Guildford 49,000. And those figures, as you will work out, will deliver the figure stated in 6.10.10, a saving of 93,000. And then finally in 12.11, again, the figures for Waverley should be 44 and for Guildford 49, thus delivering a revised saving of £93,000.
Can I just deal with that then before we move on? Can I ask officers to reflect those changes in the minutes for when this session is published? I just want to confirm with the MO. My understanding would be that the delegation under recommendation 2 of this, effectively the delegation to the head of service to get on with this, would cover any issues dealt with in what Tony has just said. And I just wanted to check that before I amend further if need be.
Yes, I don't think any amendment is required to the recommendations as a result of those amendments, but they are being recorded as part of this meeting.
In which case then, thank you. And Tony, do you want to carry on? Yeah.
Thank you. So having agreed that, first of all, I'd like to thank the officers who've prepared this very comprehensive report. Regulatory services is all too often undervalued and taken for granted, right up until the moment when it's really needed. I'd argue that other than bin collections, regulatory services has the greatest day-to-day impact on the greatest number of residents in this borough. Food safety in the restaurants and cafes we eat in, licensing of the pubs, clubs and bars that we drink in, licensing of the taxis and private hire vehicles that we call upon, as well as such things as environmental protection and enforcement and emergency planning. In many respects, our officers are the 4th emergency services for Waverley residents. The paper before you outlines proposals that offer real benefits for our residents. No doubt many will focus on the immediate estimated saving of £93,000, which is important. There will also be savings from the negotiation of single contracts for services currently provided separately to Waverley and Guildford Borough Councils, as well as the general improvements to our system. However, although important, those financial savings are merely the tip of the iceberg from these proposals. In addition to the short-term financial efficiencies, the proposals before and recommendations before you also offer opportunities for substantial long-term benefits in terms of officer flexibility, shared knowledge and experience. Going forward, and with one eye also on local government reorganisation, the recommendation for this shared service will provide Waverley and Guildford Borough Councils with the flexibility and resilience to resource and allocate that resource according to the appropriate and, where necessary, immediate needs of residents within each borough. I've heard this paper and the recommendations made within referred to as a no-brainer. Whilst understanding the term, I must disagree slightly with the choice of words. These are well-considered recommendations that, as I've said, will deliver real benefits to our residents and the residents of Guildford Borough Council. Much thought has been given to them, and I commend all 5 recommendations to this executive for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Can I also take the opportunity to thank all the officers that have been involved in this? I can't agree with you many more that statement about, in regulatory areas, when they fail, people notice them, but actually the vast majority of the time, people don't see what has gone into making them run so kind of silently and seamlessly in the background to make them work in the way that they do. Again, the no-brainer, I think, is a way of putting it. For me, when we discussed collaboration in the first place, this was exactly the sort of service that I think those of us who initiated the collaboration had in mind, because it makes the most sense to deliver this in the most effective and efficient way across two boroughs who have exactly the same statutory responsibilities and obligations across two relatively similar territories. So it makes all the sense in the world as far as I'm concerned, and the recommendations enable that very well. Any other speakers on the subject before I move to the recommendations? So they're very straightforward. In which case, could I have all those in favour of recommendations 3.1 to 3.5 on page 17, please? Thank you very much indeed. That is carried. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. In which case, then we move to item 9, the Local Authority Housing Fund Round 1, purchase of additional property, which is to be introduced and proposed by Councillor Paul Rivers and seconded by me.
Thank you, Leader, for that. And thank you too for Abby Lewis and Louisa Blundell and hundreds of other great officers that we have working on housing and lots of other things, of course, for the benefit of our residents. So this report provides an update on the delivery of homes using the funding allocation from the Local Authority Housing Fund, usually called the LAHF. Can be shortened to a laugh, I think, but the work is certainly not the first round of that. This is a government funding initiative which supports councils like us, well, in particular us, in providing quality accommodation for families arriving in the UK through the Ukrainian and Afghan resettlement schemes. Waverley Borough Council was allocated just over £2 million to deliver 11 homes, 10 of those for long-term settled housing and 1 for short-term bridging accommodation for homeless. Now, following approval of that product in August 2023, we have now secured or are in the process of securing all 11 properties. And having done that, we are currently seeing an underspend of £270,000 or thereabouts. Now, the government has permitted us to use this towards the purchasing of 1 additional home, as long as contracts will be exchanged before the end of the year. And this report seeks approval to proceed with that additional purchase and all contained within the previously agreed budget envelope. So as long as we can do it, in Tony's words, it's a no-brainer. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. And thanks to the team that have delivered this, because we're having to be, I think, fairly flexible when the government come out with these schemes and just to try and adapt to them as fast as possible so that we can maximise the benefit to our housing stock and therefore residents in need of homes. So hopefully this one is in the no-brainer category, but any other comments on this one before I bring it to a vote? No, in which case then the recommendation outlined on page 58, 2.1, is delegate to the Assistant Director of Housing in consultation with the co-portfolio holder for housing operations, authority to purchase the additional property using Local Authority Housing Fund Round 1 grant. Can I have all those in favour please show? Thank you. Now, I am just going to correct myself just in case that there is an issue with this whatsoever. In the previous item, I read through the recommendations as 3.1 to 3.5. So I'm reopening item 8 just to clarify the recommendations so that they are without doubt correct. The first recommendations 1 and 2 are that the executive resolves to do. Can I have all those in favour of recommendations 2.1.1 and 2.1.2 on the previous item, just so we're clear that we've done this properly? Thank you. And equally then, there are 3 recommendations that we recommend to council, recommendations 2.2.1 to 3. Can I have all those in favour of those recommendations to council, please? Thank you. Might have been unnecessary, but just in case, for clarity's sake, that is done. Item 10, the financial monitoring report, which is with Mark to introduce, and again, I will second.
Lovely, thank you, Leader. So this report's on pages 65 to 102 of your packs. And while that report and the appendices are self-explanatory and give more than appropriate detail of last year's outturn at length, I just want to draw out the key themes as I see them now. So in our general fund revenue account, that funds all of our core service income and expenditure, excluding social housing and capital. So while the headline underspend in these areas last year is £1.6 million, which is equivalent to almost 10% of the net budget, the bulk of those savings, about 88% of them fully, are from unspent staffing budgets, where in a seller's market, we've been unable to fill skilled vacancies at budgeted cost. This can create a stressful, if not an unsustainable, activity variance. It's not a rate one, and it can come with a non-financial cost as our officer teams work within those gaps to maintain service delivery. We routinely have to resort to temporary and agency staff at higher rates to ensure service delivery. But in fact, we have seen some improvement in those metrics over the last year, if not more. However, as the pressures of local government reorganisation build, we should be realistic about our expectations going forward. Elsewhere, income shortfalls, especially at Waverley Training Services and in our planning fee income, were more than offset by overperformance in our treasury function and our car parks. We've discussed the new business plan for Waverley Training Services elsewhere outside of this meeting, and I'll return to our treasury function shortly. £291,000 of this general fund revenue underspend has been approved under delegations for carry forward into this current year, 25-26. But for general fund capital, we also have much more significant capital budgets to roll over into this year, and they're all outlined in Appendix 6, and they are due to project delays commonly outside of our control. Turning quickly to our council social housing, for both the HRA revenue and HRA capital accounts, similar themes apply, producing a headline revenue underspend of about £1 million, and again, significant capital budgets roll forward into this current year. Turning now to our reserves, they demonstrate our strong commitment to genuine financial resilience, and we're presenting over £5.3 million of uncommitted general fund revenue balances at the year's end. That's over 30% of our general fund revenue net budget, and is roughly equivalent to comfortably over the benchmark 3 months equivalent spending. In addition to a section now, a new section dedicated to analysing receivables owed by debtors to this council. This report also concludes with the Treasury Management Annual Report for 2024-25, which details how the Treasury team continued to achieve our enhanced interest returns in 2024-25. Our qualified team has collectively about 65 years of combined relevant experience. And while we've benefited from macro improved interest rates nationally, we've benefited also from their wise choices, especially as to sector diversification and maturity. The Treasury Management Report also acts as a timely reminder of some key points of principle that are important to remember. The first of those is that cash and funds are not the same thing. The funds in our reserves are deployed across all of our net assets, some liquid, some not. While there is some correlation overall between the liquidity of our assets and the cash flow profiles of our funds, which officers do monitor carefully, specific funds are rarely, if ever, represented by ring-fenced cash deposits. Secondly, our treasury operation is pooled across both the general fund and the HRA, and interest earned is apportioned according to the relevant rules and requirements that apply. Furthermore, just as a side note, in order to compute a theoretical interest earned figure for any one specific fund for a period, one should use not only an average interest rate for that period, but perhaps more importantly, also use an average balance for that fund rather than a snapshot balance at one specific moment. So on that note, I'll thank again our finance team and commend the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. We've got to the point now where I think I actually understand the financial reporting, and it's only taken a few years, of course, but part of that is because of how clear the outturn reports are and the monitoring reports now are, as far as I'm concerned. I'm hoping everybody else is finding them equally accessible, even though this is a pretty inaccessible subject to non-accountants. I did just want to address, I promised I wouldn't mention it tonight, but I think I'm going to have to at least once. There's an explicit reference on page 100 to an issue that was raised by a number of people, and our officers, as well as you and I and others, have called out those comments as being both irresponsible and inaccurate. But there is indeed a full summation of the accusation regarding SIL interest on page 101. My apologies, page 101. As far as I'm concerned, that matter is dealt with in depth by that comment, and I would urge anybody who's watching this or has an issue with that subject to engage with the financial monitoring report here and the outturn report here and look at that section on page 101, because it deals with that subject conclusively, as far as I'm concerned and anyone here is concerned. Can I also just check as well, Surrey, of course, Surrey County Council's debt has expanded somewhat. I, among others, were accused of not being able to read a budget at Surrey, having flagged that we thought that their debt would cross over £1 billion over the course of the next quarter or so, and that is exactly what has happened. Obviously, Waverley was at the lower end of debt anyway, and most of that debt was in the social housing realm. I think our debt has actually reduced over the course of the same period, where Surrey's has materially increased.
Yeah, in the reports it says that we've actually been able to prepay a big chunk of our debt ahead of schedule, despite the fact that we actually rebased it about a year or two ago. As far as Surrey is concerned, obviously we have the external debt, and we also have their internal debt, where they don't borrow externally, but they effectively borrow against their reserves, which is a concern, because Surrey is struggling to contrive a financial resilience package of reserves, which include earmarked reserves, which collectively they're struggling to keep at 10% of their general fund net budget, rather than the 3 months worth that is generally considered adequate. So yeah, debt, cash or lack of it, and reserves in all three areas. You know, I like to think that Waverley is setting an extremely good example.
I raise those things, of course, because their issues are soon to become our issues, along with all of these other ones. Are there any other comments on the outturn report? In which case, I believe there's one recommendation, which is to note. So if we can all note that, and then we can move on to the next financial matter. So I assume that's all taken as noted. Good. Right. In which case, then moving then on to the finance report Q1 25-26, also with Mark and me as a seconder.
Thanks again, Leader. So remarkably in chronological order, we move into the first quarter of 25-26 on pages 103 to 130 of your packs. Again, this is self-explanatory in the reports, which give plenty of detail and narrative for the April to June period. And again, just in terms of the key themes, to emphasize in this report beforehand, though, when we talk about the variances and the forecasts that are in the report, I'd just like to emphasize that we're talking about the full fiscal year being reforecast based on the experience of the Q1 3 months. So any variances in there are not just for the 3 months, they are extrapolated out based on that experience. But anyway, in terms of the numbers, while both the General Fund and the HRA are forecasting to achieve, inverted commas, savings in 25-26 of £500,000 and £200,000 roughly, respectively. In both cases, also this is still principally due to additional vacancy savings and is often as a result of hard to fill posts or job evaluation market testing being required. Waverley Training Services has made efforts to mitigate its income shortfall that I mentioned earlier on, including vacancy savings and other cost reductions, bringing the overall variance expected for the year back to zero, back to break even. A 3-year business plan for WTS has been introduced to address this, and progress will be monitored throughout this financial year. Lastly, as we go into the heat of local government reorganisation, Waverley's reserves remain adequate, that's an Aston Martin terminology, and strengthen Waverley's financial resilience and our ability to manage volatility and risk. So again, thanks to the finance team, and I commend the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And I think it just underlines that our primary financial risk is more going to be those we're about to be associated with, as opposed to our own accounts going into this process. Also just a flag, I mean, from an HR perspective, we see reasonable kind of stability in terms of numbers and churn and things like that. But what that does do is hide particular issues in particular departments where we've got serious capacity issues. And whilst they might appear to be expressed as a positive thing on our balance sheet because it's a saving, what we've got actually is the inability to deliver something or do something to what we expected in the budget because we haven't got the people to do it. And increasingly under LGR, we're finding that we can't get people into those roles. So this is also me flagging in public that we are going to be in the nearish future, be looking at how we deal with the HR issues that stem from LGR over the last couple of years of Waverley's life, because they will get more acute as the unitary process goes on. Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, actually, that's an extremely good point because those stresses in our human resources, they are the cost of the savings, the monetary savings that we're making, and those stresses will affect different parts of the organisation because the demands of LGR might be slightly different to the demands of providing our normal services. As you mentioned, LGR and some of our other partner councils, you did remind me that I have had to engage with more than a handful of residents who've been reading some of the reporting, particularly from the BBC, who have referred to Woking Borough Council as WBC. And I've had to point out to them that within Surrey, there are 2 WBCs. And if anybody is watching this, I mean, I'd just like to encourage everybody to not to jump to the conclusion, because we live in Waverley, that every WBC is Waverley Borough Council. Thank you.
I've had a few of those over the last few weeks. Okay, any other comments on any of that? No, in which case let me just go back to the recommendation to make sure it's the same. In which case this is also to note the Q1 financial report. So can I take that as noted? Thank you very much, and thank you again to our finance team for all the work you've done on that. Right, now one that's always generated lots of debate wherever we've started to talk about it, which is item 12, which is the consultation response for the Band H Council Tax Voluntary Contribution Scheme, also with Mark to introduce and with me to second. Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, and the clues in the title, voluntary, and everything else in the report on pages 131 to 144 follows on from that in that context. So the report presents the results of our consultation on introducing a voluntary contribution scheme for Band H Council taxpayers, and this was developed with more than a nod to Westminster as a creative way to allow those in the very highest band of properties, a small proportion of households, the opportunity, and only if they wish, to contribute more towards supporting local services and our community. The consultation generated valuable feedback, which compared positively to the equivalent exercise undertaken in Westminster. What came through clearly is that there is interest among some Band H householders in contributing more in this way, and clear guidance on what causes those potential households would expect their contributions to benefit. So the recommendation is that officers proceed with work to prepare a report setting out the proposals for establishing a new charity to manage the scheme. This will allow us to design an approach that is voluntary, transparent and community focused, and which could provide a modest but meaningful additional funding stream for the residents of Waverley that need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And yeah, I mean, the consultation is both affirming of the positive aspects of humanity and then very much affirming of the opposite as well. On the other side of the equation, there of course should be more council tax bans in the UK, but alas. So, I mean, most of the consultation responses are very clear in weighted towards people who want to help young people and various other associated groups. That's in line with, for example, our Thriving Communities Fund, which is about 400,000 or so, isn't it, per year at the moment? A bit that I wanted to flag here, though, is that beyond the life of Waverley, if we set this charity up correctly, it may still be able to provide some benefit to the people of Waverley through not just this charity, but also other means that this resilient, financially solvent council can contribute to that charity. It may be able to provide discretionary services along the line that we deliver now to the people of Waverley in a post-unitary world that will probably have otherwise no discretionary spend at all. So beyond this specific scheme, we do need to look at the construction of that charity in order to maximise the benefit as we go forward into the future. Because as you all know, and we'll remember, I'm sure, when we get to 8 o'clock and we have the other meeting that we have to do, the successor councils have to take on these charities and manage them. And so there is nothing to prevent us from ensuring that Waverley is dealt with through some means by the unitary if we structure this correctly. Janet, I think you were registered.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. I just wanted to know, well, I think as we all know that there is considerable generosity within Waverley. And I just wonder when are we, and if so, when might we open this up to other bands, other council tax bands, and especially, if you like, given what you've just said about the government reorganisation sort of looming.
So Westminster, I think they eventually opened it up to G and didn't go any further. I personally think we're going to have to take an earlier look at that because of the timeframes that we're on. And obviously that'll be part of the discussion if we agree part 2 of the recommendations here to start the actual process of creating the charity. I assume at that point it will drift into the jurisdiction of the Shareholder and Trustee Committee for its formation and all of the rest of the business that goes with that later. But not tonight, but it'll, yeah, at some point it will come back to that. I have actually had more direct emails from people in Band C and D who have asked me if they can contribute to this. I think what we'd end up doing in the first instance is, because this will be something that you'll be able to do from direct debit or something like that, that we'll make available on the website the mechanism for anybody who just wants to do it anyway. Because there might be people who want to make one-off donations, they might not even live in Waverley, they might have family here or something, or they might be in a different band not covered by it. I think if we give people that opportunity and promote its existence to those people that have asked us about it, even if it means we don't extend it out to all other bands within the life of Waverley, at least there is the opportunity for people to do that if they want. I have actually had more people in Band C and D contact me about this positively than in Band H, rather surprisingly. So, yeah, Steve.
Yes, I think perhaps in retrospect, it was a shame that we didn't actually ask the question in terms of approval of the scheme from all council tax payers, because clearly I think there would be widespread support across the borough for this kind of scheme. The only comment that I would make at this point, really, and it's just really a kind of matter of regret, that in a period where we're experiencing a once in 50 years change in the structure of local government, we are not finding a government that's addressing the clear anomalies and lack of the progressive nature of the local government council tax system. Local government finance is in drastic need of reform, and yet while we're reforming structures, we're doing nothing to actually reform the outdated and unfair system of local government taxation and replacing it with something rather more progressive. But as I say, that's just, if you like, a side issue. But what I think is really positive about this scheme is that we are asking those who actually potentially have the most to be able, most capacity to be able to contribute to help the most disadvantaged in our borough, to give them that opportunity to be able to make that contribution. And I think, that is something which is, is worthy of our support.
Thanks, Steve. I think as far as I've been talking, when I've been talking to the government so far on LGR related matters, I do believe that they are aware of the financial issues, which is a slight change from the previous government, who seemed to be somewhat in denial on the subject quite across the board, but they don't seem to be jumping to wanting to do anything about it particularly quickly. So we do need to make sure that we have got some ability to look at discretionary spend post Waverley. I will say thank you to all of those who responded to the consultation, however you responded. There were some genuinely lovely comments in there, and there were some other ones by email that were equally incredibly generous people who understood exactly what we were trying to do here from the get-go. There were a number of others who I think had been misled by the communications of people who knew they were deliberately misleading them on the words voluntary, for example. And there were others who I think unfortunately misunderstood basically the purpose of local councils and local government across the board. So obviously I think there's a bit of an education piece in the UK about what local government does, but to those that responded positively to this, thank you. And even if we were to get roughly, half of what was discussed in the consultation, it would well exceed the setup and running costs of the charity. And as far as I'm concerned, if we can give even £1,000 more to local causes that need it in Waverley, it's worth doing. And I'm sure that once we demonstrate that it is doing that, more people will see the value in making the donation, and particularly as I'm sure it's probably tax deductible as well for those who are trying to make sure this is an efficient process in their own personal lives and accounting. Any other comments or queries on this? Otherwise, I'll bring it to the recommendations. So we've got 2.1, which is to note the outcome of the Band H Council Tax Voluntary Contribution Scheme consultation, and 2.2 to confirm that officers should proceed with the work in preparing a report to members to propose the setting up of a new charity to administer this scheme. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you very much indeed. Now, as there is no reason to exclude members of the public, I can close this meeting at 19:45. Please don't go too far away, because at 8 o'clock we can start the Executive Shareholder and Trustee Committee to review some charity accounts. So thank you all. 19:45, meeting closed.